Welcome to Timberborn and the settlement of the Skyborn. My name is Zedek, and I am on a quest to turn this entire map into a vertical skyscraper city. We're about mid-game right now, and we're getting to the good part. We've got a big enough industry, and I've started to prepare some land. I think it's time to start building bigger structures. And for this episode, I've got one big thing on my mind. I want to build a giant vertical power plant. In fact, I want to build two of them. So last episode, we spent a good chunk of time kind of flattening out this land, which is going to be our industrial quarter. And the flat land is a little boring right now, but it's kind of a blank canvas so we can start building some interesting things. And the most important thing of this is going to be a power plant. I want to start piping bad water into a vertical series of water wheels so I can generate as much energy as I'm going to need for the rest of the game. So that's the main goal, and if we have some extra time, maybe I can start terraforming and building some other industrial towers. If you haven't seen some of the earlier episodes, I'm roughly dividing this map into 4 quadrants based on the aqueduct that's going through the middle. I've got Old Town in the bottom left, which I'm kind of going to let grow into a hive city. Our top left is going to be our industrial zone, and the top right that we're currently using for forests, that eventually is going to be our future high-tech, very orderly skyscraper district. And this bottom right one, I'm not really sure what I'm going to do with it. I might keep a lot of the terrain there the same and make it kind of like a vacation district or suburbs. This episode, though, is all about the industrial zone. And if you didn't see last episode, this terrain over here used to be very gnarly, and I spent a lot of time trying to get it under control. And in the process, one of the big things I was planning for is trying to hide all the bad water so I could put it underground. And if I look at the very bottom of the map, you can see I actually did start to run some pipes. And the idea is that these pipes are going to be able to connect all our bad water sources down here, and that they're going to be able to connect to wherever I'm going to build a power plant. And by power plant, I basically mean something like this. A situation where I've got bad water flowing through a series of water wheels, and I can use a bad water dome to keep it running 24/7. Now, the existing power plant I've got is based off this bad water dome that kind of takes this roundabout route through our industrial district. But eventually, this is all going to be torn off once we build our new one. So before we jump in and start building, let's come up with a game plan. So on this quadrant, I've got bad water sources here and here and here. And so the idea is I want to connect all these with a pipe, and I would like to build, I think, the power plants over here somewhere. And I'm going to build 2 of them. The idea is that this is the farthest point from where the beavers are going to live, so I'm going to kind of put it in an out-of-the-way location. Now, for these bad water sources, what I would like to do is connect them with pipes, drag the water all the way underneath the map, and then have it feed into the power plants here and here. Now, as for the power plants themselves, since I'm going for a very vertical playthrough, I do want these to be towers. And the idea is that I'm gonna make something that zigzags back and forth like this. And at that point, it's gonna go down to another layer. So I'm gonna stack stuff like this, one on top of each other, all the way up in kind of a vertical tower. And there's gonna be some trickiness involved with this because I need to make sure that I have enough flow rate going and that when I drop down to the next layer in this tower, I have enough room for the waterfall to let all that CMS go through. The other interesting part is when this pipe gets over to the corner, I basically have to take it to the top of the map where I'm going to feed into these towers. And then when the water gets down to the bottom after the last zigzag, I'm going to have to route it off the map to eventually be drained. I think one of the first things I want to start with is kind of outlining the shapes of the power plants so I can kind of figure out where the pipe needs to go and we can start, dynamiting down. Now, I've kind of pre-measured the dimensions I need in a test map. I'm looking at something that is 9 by about 31. And you notice this is something that is an experimental now that I really like. You notice when I drag this, it actually gives me the size down there. Example, it says 1 of 9. That's new and very handy. So this would go up 9 that way, and I'm going to need something that's 9 this way. And I need to kind of adjust these. What I want is these power plants to be pushed as much as I can into the corner. So that's a 9 by 9 with a little bit of space, dead space in here, and this is going to be where we're going to fit in all the pipe stuff. The other thing that you'll notice is I'm trying to put this flush with the edge of the map. That's because I kind of would like to see into these towers from the outside, so I can kind of see what's going on. So that's roughly the shape over here. And I can just kind of repeat the dimensions over on this side. And to get an idea of what I'm going for here, The idea is it should zigzag back and forth like this and then end up on the exact same side. And what makes this a little tricky is that every time I go down to a floor below, I'm going to need to make it a little bit wider just to account for the flow rate. So I can't utilize all the space. It's probably going to look, something like this, stacked layer after layer. And then finally, there's going to be water wheels stacked in all these places as much as I can. So that's the general shape. Now, I think the first thing I need to do is dig all of this down to the second to bottom layer of the map. Because the idea is still, I need to get room for that pipe over here to get over to this corner. So I can't go all the way down to the bottom of the map or I'm going to run into that. So I think what I'm going to do is keep just the corner pieces here. So I remember the dimensions and just start carting in some dynamite. And last episode, I just built all of these dynamite factories. So hopefully this shouldn't take forever to build. And because this is going to take a couple of rounds, I'm going to extend some of our tube network over here. If you've seen my last major series I did with the Steel Tide, I'm trying to do something a little bit different with the power plant in this one. That one I really relied on large power wheels, which is probably the most efficient way to go about doing this. But I just want to mess with small water wheels for a bit and see what I can pull off with them. I think it also really lends itself to vertical playthroughs, which is I'm really trying to do with this one. And managing that with large water wheels is a lot harder. And I'm starting to notice that this TNT is taking longer than I would like. And I think that's because we're kind of out of extract. That's because we've got a lot of draw and extract, and I think we've only got one machine carried all the way down here, one centrifuge. Really, I think our extract is going to our advanced breeding pods, so I don't want to disrupt too much of that for dynamite. I think one thing I could do is put in some other temporary centrifuge over here. I hate having to build more stuff in here because I really do want this to be more towers. So this is going to be something, again, probably temporary, and then we're going to pull out partway through this episode. This area is really messy. I'm not a fan, but we'll have to do for now. And a little bit of storage over here I think is going to help too. You might also notice that I've got a really big worker shortage, and that's really my fault related to extract as well. Extract is also used by our mine over here. It was using this efficient recipe over for our mine, and it was just sucking up all our extract. So we actually went a few seasons without any new beavers coming in. For example, you can see the effect right here with all the dynamite starting to consume it all. We went a few days without any beavers, so it kind of gave us a population collapse. Like normally, I think our carrying capacity is up in like past 200. So I've got 33 vacancies as a result. Personally, I think that's kind of interesting. You would think the colony is doing super well, but just me taking something as innocuous as extract and using it elsewhere could have silently collapsed the colony. 2 more of these plants, though, should hopefully help with our draw. That taken care of, let's get the rest of the TNT laid down. And well, unfortunately, this is taking longer than I would like. Really, extract is our limiting resource. And using it for our dynamite really is starving it for our breeding pods. In fact, just to make sure our population didn't fully collapse, I ended up having to put a couple regular breeding pods in there. That makes me wonder, it may actually be faster to use regular dynamite than the regular 3 dynamite. Just for this, because we have as much explosives as I could use. That said, let's go ahead and light this dynamite up and see how close we are to the bottom of the map. Well, not bad. Let me see. We actually may be very close to what we need. So you can see this tunnel right here, that's where the pipe is. So if the pipe is going to go all the way through here, I think we only need one more layer then, because I can't go any deeper than that or I'm going to possibly cut into the pipe. In that case, that's pretty good, because then we don't need any extract for this next round of dynamiting. All this can go in free and clear. Now, as for how to get down there to lay down the dynamite, the easiest way would be to just lay down some stairs and they could walk down. But I'm expecting that I'm going to have to do some building in here. So it's probably worth my time to build a longer term answer, at least until we can get the beginning parts of the tower done. Overall, this is pretty ridiculous. It would be a lot more resource efficient if I just made, bits and pieces of scaffolding as I need it. I'm kind of being a little bit lazy here, but, what's the point of having all these resources if I'm not going to actually use them? All right, that is the last of the TNT laid down. Let's get this layer gone and we can start running the power plant. So I'm going to use the layer view here to get a better look of what's going on. I think one thing we should probably start out with is getting the tunnel or the pipe the rest of the way through. So this should reside one layer below everything else. But we can make use of the new tunnel and we'll run this all the way down here. This is something I probably could have had taken place during everything else, but that's all right. And we'll take it, say, over to here. That should get us over into the corner that we care about. If I'm right, I think they should be able to get to this tunnel from up here. Will they be able to do that? Yeah, that'll be much faster than having to run through the pipe system. Now for the fun stuff. We've got to figure out the zigzag pattern. I'm going to start with this one because there's less to worry about what's going on here. So I think I'm going to have the end of both of these end here. So this is going to be the outlet. And the idea is that through the power plants, they're both going to end up at this last part, join something, and then we're going to run it off the edge of the map. And that's probably going to be, say, a pipe this way. So the exit of all the bad water is going to go through here. In that case, all I need to do is run through all of this and come out with the zigzag pattern. Actually, no, I have this off a little bit. I just realized I dynamited this down with the expectation that the wall was going to be regular levees. Yeah, that's what I was going for. Part of the reason I'm doing that is I want to keep the bad water from touching dirt directly. Because eventually I'm going to have this fully irrigated on the outside of all the power plants, so I don't want any of that kind of going to waste. And we're just going to do the exact same on the opposite side. Just maybe, and I'll just kind of maybe wait for the last little bit here for the tunnel to be put in. And since this is a case where I'm going to have a lot of building going on, it probably makes sense to ship in some material. Mainly logs. I think logs is the main thing that I'm going to use because it's going to be a lot of levees. Thankfully, we do have a lot of trees, plus all this storage over here that I've been accumulating for this in mind. So I've got the final floor kind of set up here. The one thing I have to be wary of is when these two streams meet, there's probably going to be about 5 to 6 CMS in each. I need to make sure that there's no bottleneck when they start flooding through here. This might be, because there's one square that they're going to have to meet, I might be able to kind of get around it with this. Yeah, that should be fine. Because now it's going to split between these two areas. And then I'll have to figure out exactly how it's going to drain off the map. I might just let it free flow through here and then have the pipe going up. Next, let's go ahead and put down all those water wheels. I'm just going to spam them out and then I'm going to connect them with a bunch of power gears just so I have one connection for each tower. And the next thing I need to figure out is how I'm going to get water up to each of these floors for this power plant. I'm thinking I can kind of put a pipe over here, kind of push back from everything. And the reason I'm doing that is every floor, the water has to enter in a different area. That's just kind of the way it works with this zigzag pattern. Finally, this also gives me a little bit of space so that I can figure out how I'm going to get those power shafts to go up vertically. As I'm building this, I really could build this in stages. For example, I could build one of these floors and get it running, and then when power demands increase, I could keep building more. I don't think I'm going to do that. At least for now, I want a few floors built just so I can prove out the concept. I mean, this is a vertical playthrough, and if I just buried it underground, I think that would be kind of a waste. For example, if I really wanted to, right here, I could probably seal this off, right? Like, I think this is close enough to the surface already that I could just put dirt across all of this and you wouldn't know it's there. And it would probably be enough power for what I need. But, you know, again, I want this to be a skyscraper city, so I really want a vertical skyscraper power plant. And just to remind myself, how high can I go up here? Like, let me see. If I put levees all the way up, how high is this going to let me build? Oh man, I forgot how high this is. Well, I have a lot of clearance for a lot of power. I'm not going to build all this right now. We'll see. So if you have a guess of once this thing is fully built and I've got all these rows up to the top of the skybox, how much horsepower do you think this thing is going to generate? So given that our build queue is very full and this shouldn't take too long to build, let's do another quick time lapse and then I can figure out the next floor. Once I get the next floor, I can kind of see how I'm going to have to repeat this as we go vertically. Let's take a look here. This is a pretty impressive looking grid of power. So I need to more or less just repeat this entire thing one up. And unfortunately, water wheels, they require a decent amount of clearance. So for example, I really wish I could get it something like this. Like that would be just quite kind of touching it, but no go. We need at least 2 of these, followed by an overhang. Looks like a ton of clearance. Now, I could use probably dirt if I was really dedicated here. It would look a little bit better. But again, the problem is I don't want bad water touching dirt and contaminating stuff. So that's probably out. I think I'm going to just go straight up metal overhangs. And for the stories, you know, it's not going to be too bad. I think what I could do is more or less just create platforms on either side and then connect them. Something like this. That seems pretty straightforward. I think the only thing special I want to do is make sure that the connections over here are symmetrical. Maybe something like that. That doesn't look too bad. It's also going to be a little tricky for this corner because they share this kind of corner with each other. Maybe I'm going to cheat kind of in this corner part. I'm going to have them start just a little bit less than everything else. Yeah, okay, I think this is going to work. And then I'm just going to repeat the exact same thing over on this side. And done. And unfortunately, because this is increasing in height so quickly, I think we're going to invalidate our scaffolding after this run. We're going to have to figure out a better way to get up to the next stories, which will probably be with tubeways. Like, I think the next thing I'll do is I'll probably have to build our scaffolding way high, so I'm not going to have to continuously tear it down. That said, let's use it while we still can and build this first story. Now, it is taking a little bit longer than I would like, and that's because we've reached a new bottleneck, which is really planks. We have like a lot of plank production, but these overhangs, they just suck up a ton of them. Example, I look over here, look at all these. We have all these producing planks, and it's just not enough. You know, I would really like to start expanding and adding more factories, especially as our population continues to bounce back up. So maybe what I could do for now is just build the next story of our power plant, get that operational, and then we can kind of come back and start building other stuff. And I think this is probably going to be the last I can use this scaffolding for. In fact, I probably won't even be able to use it entirely for this part. So let's at least get kind of the outline of this design done. And I think this is also going to highlight the challenge that I'm going to run into with this design. And I mentioned this earlier, it has to do with getting water between the layers. Now, if you haven't watched one of the other videos I did about water mechanics explained, I'm going to go over one very relevant piece here. And that's that when you have water flowing down a river, there's a CMS or a flow rate associated with it. And whenever it has to go down a waterfall, each edge of that waterfall only allows roughly about 2.2 CMS of flow through. And if you go over that, there's going to be a bottleneck. Let's say I've got water flowing down this channel, right? And I get to here and I want it to go down to the next story. Let's say that I did have these metal floors. So water goes down and it hits this part right here. Because there's no floors on this, it's going to fall to the next story down. Now, I've only got one edge here. And because there's only one edge, that means 2.2 CMS. That's the limit. For a channel, one high, this can go up to about, 6.6 CMS until there's overflow. Probably going to have about 4 to 5 CMS through here. So I probably need... If I'm being conservative, I need at least 3 edges in here to account for water to fall downward. So that means probably something like this, right? So if the water comes in over this way, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4. That's 4. So I probably don't even need that. I could probably get away with closing that up 1 more layer. There we go. That gives me 3 edges, which would be 6.6 CMS, which is more than I need. So you can see the downside is that eats into some of the areas I could use for zigzagging. Not the end of the world, but it is a complication you've got to account for. And unfortunately, you can see here's where our overhangs are going to cause some trouble. I'll lay down what I can get away with, and then we'll come back and figure it out. And then I'm just going to repeat the exact same thing over on this side. Luckily, this part shouldn't go cheap because all of these levees just require logs, and we still have a good, 1,500 of them left. And fortunately, we seem to be eating into our tree supply pretty quickly. You know, at some point, we're going to have to do a vertical tree farm. I think that would be pretty cool to figure out somewhere over here. So I'm going to let them build what they can here to begin with. And then we'll come back, destroy the scaffolding, and I can figure out the rest of the water wheels. In the meantime, I'm going to do a side quest. To get all this running, I need, as I mentioned, a pipe with actual flow of bad water. And our bad water sources that are going to feed this are over here and over here. And in order for the pipe to basically push water uphill or upwards, the pipe needs to be under pressure. Like there needs to be nowhere else the water could possibly go. And to do that, I'm going to have to seal off these bad water sources. You can see I've already got them connected to a pipe here, but they need to be forced into that pipe, so they can't just fill up these pools. So that's going to mean more or less sealing these off somehow. Now, one thing I need to be mindful of with this stuff is I need to avoid getting everything contaminated. Because if I just have bad water here, it might damage the soil. I think I'm okay in this case though, because one of the things I do have in my favor is that contamination's effects go down the higher the soil level is above the bad water. And I think this is going to be at least maybe 2 layers above, so I think that should effectively negate its effects, hopefully. And if not, I'll just build a tower on top of it so nobody will see. That's my backup plan. So I think what we can do is fill in dirt as much as we can in all these corners. And I'm pretty sure that there's 4 CMS of flow. So what I can do is just make sure there's enough room down here to connect it down with this one. And then it's going to go into the pipe down there. So all of this, I think, is fair game to make flat. I've done in the past where I've had to make like complicated overhangs and whatnot to seal it off. With 3D dirt, I think I can just seal it off on its own, because these things are relatively tiny. I mean, yeah, look at this. I can just seal it like that. I don't have to do overhangs or anything super complicated here. I think the only thing that I need to make sure I'm doing is this part needs to be sealed like that so that there's enough clearance for the water to flow down. And I could disguise it like that. Fill in all the dirt here. Oh yeah, that was a lot easier than I was expecting. With 3D dirt, I don't have to mess around with any of the complex stuff. But yeah, I think that is looking perfect for what we need. I shouldn't have a bottleneck here. Everything falls down to the bottom. And then from here, it's going to run down to the end. Now, one thing I should probably do, now that I look at this, just in case I need to get down here to work later, we should put a sluice gate, I think, here. A sluice gate maybe at the end of the map here. And I could probably do one over on this side too. So what I'm thinking is if I need to do actual construction down in the tunnel, I can turn these on, drain the system, and then let beavers in here. And I'll just seal this off with a levee I can destroy or something else. Yeah, 3D dirt is something I'm really excited about now. Between it and tunnels, I've got a lot of new building options to figure out. And that is looking nice and sealed off. And if I take a look back over at the power plant, it looks like we're more or less done with what we can complete with the scaffolding present. So I'm just going to tear all that scaffolding out, and then we can go ahead and fill in the parts that we couldn't get to. And before I forget, I'm going to make sure to seal everything here with impermeable floors so the water doesn't leak down to the next layer. With all the zigzags taken care of, we just now need to put down another set of water wheels. And this part does get a little bit tedious. You can see I just need to lay down everything back and forth. The other part that is going to be tedious is getting crews in here to connect all these to power. This is another case where scaffolding would be a lot nicer if I had scaffolding all the way up at the top of the map. Eventually I'm going to do that. I think the next, when I have to build the rest of this tower, that's what I'm going to do. For now though, until I'm ready to pay that cost, I'm just going to put them down manually and then probably have some stairwells to get beavers in here. And just be very careful about the order I have them building things. With that, we've got everything more or less done. I think the last step we need to figure out is how to get water from the pipe into this system and then connect the first floor and the second floor together. Well, the pipe is the trickier part, and I think that's going to kind of interfere with everything else. So let's figure that part out first. So the inlet that I need to get everything over to is over here. So these two spots. And I'm running into the exact same problem I have down below, where I need this a little bit wider, since there's probably going to be 12 CMS of water getting here, and then it splits up. So I need to make some system to go from here over to here. And you know, I don't think I have to be too complex here. Probably the simpler the better. So maybe I can just create some platforms down there, have something running like that, and then I can have the pipe let out water over here. So the pipe's going to let stuff out here, it's going to run over here, and I'll have these two sluice gates to regulate flow outward. Now for the power line, that's a little bit trickier. I think what I could probably do is run them down this way, get them to join, and then the next power line should be right below us. So I could probably just run it and have it go straight up. And again, probably the most annoying part of all of this is just going to be to get beavers out here to construct it. That's the price when I had to pull out all that scaffolding. Oh, and of course, before I forget, the other very vital part of this is I'm going to have to seal off the pipe, because this part is still under pressure. I don't want it leaking. So that part is going to be sealed off. So we'll get the beavers to finish that last part, and then I think we're ready to do a test run of the system. I more or less want to see if it's going to work, if it's going to fail anywhere, if we have to tweak the design in any part. And then if it does look good, then we know we can just keep on repeating this up, 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 up until we get to the top of the map. My biggest concern is probably these sluice gates kind of regulating flow when I don't want it to. I'm going to have them try to more or less keep everything open until it gets to 0.95, as much water as I can get out of here, and that should prevent it from overflowing. So here comes the big test. Let's go over to our underground cavern that we built here. We're going to open this one, and we're going to open this one. So the other thing that we have to kind of watch out for is that water will move up the pipe kind of together as a whole system. So before this water will go up, this water has to go up as well, until it has nowhere else to go. Well, this is too bad. I guess this was too close to the bad water. Maybe I should have sealed it off with a pipe top or something. That's okay. We might just have to build a tower on top of that little blemish. But looking over here, we should start to see the water move up the pipe, getting to the top, moving across the bridge, and there it goes in to start the run. You know, something I should have done, and I think I can probably fit in without too much trouble, it's 2 water gauges. That way I can measure the flow going through this system. We've got about 100 horsepower and climbing. Total output of the system is 3,000 in climbing. Our other one is about 2,000 in comparison. Already, before this system is even started, we're already passing our other power plant up. Oh, I love to see this slowly starting to come online. Now you can see this is where I was cautious to have these sluice gates open and close. As you can see, if it gets a little bit higher, it would overflow. So the sluice gates are really regulating it so it hopefully doesn't flood anywhere. Here we go. Here's the next vital step. I want to see if this will actually flow downward. So you can see right now it's probably getting past 2.2, so we're in the 4 range. So it curbed out enough and is flowing down, and there is the first floor starting to come online. Perfect. And so far, nothing is flooding. Of course, I say it doesn't flood, and immediately I see it start flooding here. I'm going to keep an eye on that. I'm thinking it might just be the water equalizing and trying to figure out where to flow. So it hopefully will get better. And I'm seeing the same flooding effect over here. So let's give it some time. Maybe once the water runs through the rest of this bottom area, it will force it through there without any more flooding. There's the last 2 water wheels, and that should just expand and then run off the edge of the map. And if we're lucky, this flooding should hopefully go away once everything stabilizes. Yes, it did. Okay, perfect. That's good. That is what I was expecting. Because if our second floor wasn't flooding with the CMS going through, the first floor should be able to handle the exact same flow. And what do we got here? We've got roughly 4 CMS going through each side. And we've got a total power output of 30K. I'll take it. Like, I know large water wheels would have probably produced more power for this space, but for being stackable, this is pretty good. And using this, I could probably estimate how much additional power we could get if we kept stacking it. So given that this is 30K, we can kind of estimate we get about 15K per floor. And looking at the side, each floor takes about 4 height. Counting this out, I think we could probably swing about 6 additional floors of power. So 16 additional floors at 15k each, we're looking at roughly 90 to 100k of additional power. So I think ballpark, that should be about 130k total if we build this entire system. Not bad for completely vertical play. If we really do that, that is just going to be a giant dominating tower. It would just be larger than anything else we've built so far. And you know what? Why not we build a couple stories now? In the time it's taken to build some of this, our population's grown up to 250. We've got a good amount of supply. I mean, this is a vertical playthrough after all. I think it would look good if we start having another skyscraper. And, you know, the hardest part of this build is going to be getting up there to build all this stuff. So before we start actually building all the layers of this, I'm going to start off with building some scaffolding. This monstrosity, you can see all I've done is create tubes all the way up as high as I can. And I've spaced these 2 apart. So I think that should allow them to build down to the left and to the right, giving me complete coverage for everything. And this is more or less as high as I can make it. I'm at the top of the map in terms of being able to build any more tubes. So I think this should give us pretty good clearance for as long as we're going to need. And there we've got our scaffolding. Man, that is bigger than anything else in this playthrough so far. It also gives us an idea of where the top of this place is going to be once I've got all these skyscrapers built. I mean, at this point, it does kind of look almost like skyscraper cranes. But with the cranes built, I'm going to go ahead and queue up the build for the next couple of stories of this power plant. And really for these stories, it's just going to be an exact carbon copy of the things that you've seen before. So with all that queued up, I think I'm just going to give them some time to build everything, and we're going to see what we end up with. And we've got our completed power plant, which I've taken to calling the powerhouse because it looks kind of like a house. Now, this thing was very expensive to build, and you notice I didn't even get all the way up to the top because this already took about 2 seasons to make because this thing was just such a resource sink. Between logs, planks, and metal, it just took everything this colony produced. I think I still have the option of building this taller, but for this stage of the map, I think 4 stories is going to do it for what we need. A couple things I want to do first, though. You'll notice I had to rearrange the pipe to get the water up to the top level this time. So I turned off our water supply. So let's get that running. There it goes. I expect this is just going to slowly ramp up the power plant. So you can see the wheels coming online bit by bit as it zigzags through all these stories. And you'll notice down here, I had to build our factory out a little bit more during all of this just because it was such a power hog, including even tapping into that power over here because I needed to power all this industry to build it. So that is the powerhouse. And you can see it is pretty tall. When I go look over at our other skyscraper, it's almost as tall as our residential tower. Now, before I rip out all these cranes, I think there's one last thing I'd like to add. You know, it's going to be easier while I've got the cranes here. I think it would make it look interesting if I had a monument at the top. Say, the tribute to ingenuity. This is the monument that requires actual power to run. So I think that would be kind of fitting just to sit there way at the top of the power plant. I think all we would need to do is splice on over here. Then I could take this power line all the way up to our pipe, have that go upward, and then just figure out the height that we need this thing at. And thanks to our cranes, that should be pretty quick to build. So before I remove the scaffolding, one of the last things I want to do is a spot check. I want to go floor by floor and just kind of make sure that all the water is going the way it should. So you can see all I'm doing is I'm looking at the water, following the zigzag, making sure there's no flooding, no water being where it shouldn't, and just going down each floor. But overall, this is looking good. I've been pretty happy with the way this build turned out. Okay, with all that taken care of, I think it's time to remove the scaffolding. And I'm going to be a little bit careful here. I want to try to reclaim as much of the resources as I can. And so I'm just going to kind of do a controlled demolition. So as I delete things, the rubble should go at the other part of this platform that's available. And now I can finally get rid of all the scaffolding giving us a nice view of the powerhouse. Oh, and also there's apparently a beaver here. What are you doing sitting in midair? He must have been inside the construction when I was deleting the scaffolding. I actually wonder what's going to happen to him. Is he just going to respawn? I bet he's going to respawn at the ground. Yep, there he is. Oh no, he spawned here, of course. Really? That's where you're going to go? How am I going to get you out of that? I mean, obviously I'm going to have to save him somehow. Well, I have a ton of planks, so I guess I can afford it. This is just kind of silly. You better be a productive member of society when all this is done, because Beaver Society's going out on a limb for you. Get on down, get off of those stairs, and then we'll delete these, and you guys should hopefully fall straight. I didn't see that coming. I thought they would fall directly below, not be stranded over here. Okay, I've just managed to make this even worse. So, we're just going to repeat that process and be a little bit more careful this time. I need you guys to escape. Come on, get out of there. Okay, that's better. Okay, we've got the scaffolding removed, we got the powerhouse in play. I think there's one last thing, though, I want to do before wrapping up this episode. And that's, I want to make the terrain a little bit more 3D. I know when I built the powerhouse, I made it nice and flat, but I'd like to return a little bit more terrain here. And I'm thinking of maybe adding a ditch in front of the powerhouse, just in case it kind of leaks, and I don't know, kind of make it look multi-dimensional for storage or something. For the actual channel that I'm planning on building, I'm thinking this is going to be fairly deep. So we've got to go 4 deep until we're down to the bottom of the powerhouse. But I don't want to go down to the bottom of the map because I still want the option to build more pipes. So kind of leaving the bottom of the map to be reserved. And I'm thinking this is going to be staggered when it goes up. I just don't want like a square ditch. So I'm thinking I want one of these to be reserved for maybe decorative walls. Then I want maybe 3 things flat at the bottom. Then I'm thinking there's going to be kind of a hill that goes up too. Then this is going to be too wide, and then that will take us to the actual top of the ditch. So you can see here, it'll cover 5 height, and that should give me some decorations, flat, flat, and then top. And then maybe what I could do is this part up here, this could be part of a river, 3 wide. So that way I could bring irrigation to this part of the map too. Not going to use it for anything really. I don't think we're going to really use farms over here, but that would probably work. So that tells me I need to dynamite down a channel 6 wide all the way down through here. Actually, you know what may be interesting? Let me make this part of the channel 3 wide. If I just push everything back a bit, because then that would give me the option of putting storage kind of down here in the channel. Yeah, I kind of like that. That might look interesting. And if I'm thinking about water, then this part right here is going to be the channel that will actually hold water. So it can go fairly deep. I don't care. And it can connect all the way back over with this side if I needed to. This is a fairly big undertaking. Luckily, I think we've got a lot of extract and TNT available. So why don't we wrap up this episode with one final time lapse to build this ditch. And I think that's going to do it for this episode. Otherwise, I'm pretty happy with how the powerhouse turned out. At 60k power, that's going to get us through most, if not all, of the game now. So as I eye next episode, I'm really looking forward to figuring out how to build out the rest of the industrial district. As always, I hope you enjoy these videos, and I hope to catch you next time.